Hello everyone, my name is Richard Gentry, President and founder of RG Strategic Interventions LLC. I want to welcome you to this module, which is the third of a four-part series on teaching responsibility. And what lands in the forefront of teaching responsibility when it comes to young people is the cognitive behavioral therapy concept, or what we call CBT. So we want to further talk about that in regards to what kind of things do we need to teach when it comes to this particular intervention with kids. When we think cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral interventions, one concept that comes to the forefront is cognitive restructuring. Now, what is cognitive restructuring? It is the process of changing inaccurate negative thoughts into positive thoughts. So the goal of cognitive restructuring is to rewire the brain to get rid of those old concepts, old ways of thinking, and replace them with new ways of thinking. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that process works in the next two modules. But I want to present to you, for your purposes of further research, some of the major players in cognitive restructuring, cognitive behavioral therapy. They have wonderful works out there. And so you want to familiarize yourself with Albert Ellis, Donald Meichenbaum, Aaron Beck, Stanton Seminow, Maxie Malsby. These are some of the movers and shakers in the field. And so if you Google their works and research them, you'll get a much more thorough understanding of what cognitive restructuring is as it relates to cognitive behavioral therapy. So what we want to do is create new neural networks within the brain so that we can replace the old networks that cause self-defeating behaviors and bad thinking. There's a term going all the way back to 1949 that was coined by a neuropsychologist by the name of Donald Hibbs. And he said this, that neurons that fire together wire together. So what we want to do when we create these new neural pathways is that these neurons that tend to fire at the same time, and there's the word that comes into play called synapses. We want those neurons to be able to recreate these new networks of pro-social and positive behaviors. So what's described here is how these neural pathways or networks in the brain are formed and reinforced through repetition. We want to prune those old pathways that produce negative thoughts and reactions and recreate or create new pathways through repetition and reinforcement. I want to share an experience with you how this process works. For many years, I take the same route to work. And as creatures of habit, most of us are creatures of habit, we tend to do the same thing day in and day out. And as I deviate just a little bit, I want to talk about processes such as people attending workshops and seminars. Say if it's a 3-day seminar, what you're going to find is that people are going to sit in the same seat each of those 3 days. So if you are a workshop or seminar presenter, the only thing you really have to do is learn the names of individuals and where they sit the first day, and you pretty much got this coin for the next 2 or 3 days because people are going to sit in the same seat. So on my way to work, I take a particular pathway to work or a particular direction every day for many, many years. And with me doing that, I can pretty much put my mind on autopilot and take that route to work, and I'll get there without any problems. During one particular period of time, there was a building that I typically would turn into a drive to get to my place of work. It was a bit of a shortcut. But they added on to this building. They put an addition there. And in the process of putting on that addition, they had to close that particular street that I would normally take. And so they put a fence up there so they can do the things they needed to do with the construction process. So for the next 2 weeks on my way to work, I would continue to turn down that particular street, although it was gated and I could not get through there. And I would go up to the gate and I'll say, wow, I forgot about this construction. So I would have to back my car out and go another route. This event happened for about 2 straight weeks, and it caused a degree of frustration to me because how could I forget again? How could I forget again? The issue was one of my brain was wired in a particular way that I would automatically go towards that street, even though it was closed. And then I had to back up and take another route. So to remedy that problem, I had to think in advance. Okay, this particular street is closed due to construction and you cannot get to your place of work from that particular street. So I had to make a plan before I got to that particular point to remind myself that you can't get that way to your job. You have to go an alternate route. And I had to do that. I had to think about that before I got in my car. I had to think about that on my way to work, that I had to take an alternate route. So in essence, that's what we're doing with kids. Many of the kids that we work with, because of things that has happened to them in their social environment, because of their interactions, their dysfunctional thinking, because their danger radar has been up and activated to protect themselves from harm, because they feel threatened because of the world around them, they see the world a certain way. And oftentimes they see the world in a negative and a hostile way. So our job is to try to help to restructure or rewire their brain through these new neural networks or pathways through repetition of pro-social concepts, pro-social activities, pro-social thoughts, through role plays, through teaching them alternative ways of doing things. And as a result, when they come to that roadblock or that fork in the road where they have a tendency of making bad choices because of their histories in their past, they can think of other ways or new ways of doing things. So I share that example only to say that we have to think in advance. We have to practice. We have to work through repetition in order to rewire our brain. We talked a little bit about the fact that the brain is plastic. And that is a term used in neuroscience, plasticity. And because our brains are plastic, we can prune out those old negative neural networks and we can recreate new pro-social neural networks. So that is really the goal of cognitive restructuring when it comes to CBT. Now, what kind of things do we want to teach when we approach the concept of CBT? We are not opposed to pharmaceuticals and psychotropic drugs, but we have to understand that they put a damper on behaviors and they don't necessarily teach new pro-social behaviors, but it can calm people down and cause them not to maybe react in violent ways or have these tantrums and outbursts that can result in delinquent behaviors and trouble with the court system. So there is a need of pharmaceuticals and psychotropic drugs in the work that we do. But in CBT, we prescribe teaching above treating. So now the question becomes, what kind of things do we teach? We talked about the concept of stop and think in a previous module. And so the latest research when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy is that people tend to think in automatic ways. So one of the things that we want to do with our young people is to teach them to become less automatic in their thinking. How do we do that? We have to teach them warning signs. We have to teach them anger cues. We have to teach them to really get in contact with their bodies in regards to physical sensations and feelings and things like that, because they can be precursors to negative behavior. So stopping, thinking, slowing down before you react is very important in the cognitive process. Because again, we have to look at the fact that most delinquent behaviors are not premeditated. A situation comes forth, people in an automatic way process those situations, and because of their worldview and their histories, tend to respond in a negative way. So it's so important for us to be able to help people see what's coming down the pipe and to be able to think of ways of handling the situation as opposed to dealing with it in a negative way. So one of the major things we need to teach is the concept of self-talk. Now, everybody engage in self-talk. That's that little voice in your head. Sometimes it's depicted as that angel on your shoulder on one side, and then that demon on the other side of your shoulder. Both are talking to you in regards to positive thoughts and then negative thoughts. And obviously what we want to do is engage in negative thoughts because we understand that positive thoughts bring forth positive feelings bring about positive actions bring forth positive outcomes. So we want to be able to teach people a new way of thinking, because we know that if we can teach them to think a certain way, they're going to engage in better outcomes in regards to the decisions that they're making. So new self-talk, and when we talk self-talk, we talk rational versus irrational thinking, and that's very important in the process. Another thing we want to teach is we want kids to recognize and analyze problems and then consider alternative behaviors when they analyze and rationalize their problems. So this is the part of slowing down before you act, that once a situation occurs, that if you can only slow down the train, you will be able to think of alternative ways. So with the CBT process, we put lots of alternative ways of handling situations before people, and we role play those situations out. So if a situation comes forth in real life, now you have choices. You do not have to be as automatic as you were before. Because in times past, situation happens, your only choice or your only way of moving forward is through this irrational and automatic way. But now with choices, you can be able to think through a situation, analyze a situation, consider positive and negative consequences, and then choose the positive consequences. So teaching self-talk to be able to recognize and analyze problems that are before you and consider rational alternatives is extremely important. So we teach ways of thinking more logical and rational, also without distorting facts or externalizing blame. So everything that happens in life isn't the other person's fault. Sometimes you make poor choices and you're the fault of your behavior. But with a lot of the irrational thinking and irrational behaviors, people tend to externalize blame. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. And we distort the facts. So we need to understand that when we think rational, we think logical. We try not to distort facts, and we make an attempt not to blame others for things that we can do something about. And as I close, I want to talk about this important concept. That typically people who commit certain delinquent acts and are involved in antisocial behaviors tend to be very egocentric, or they tend to have an egocentric view of the world. Some people may see this as exhibiting narcissistic personalities. The world do not revolve around us. The world do not revolve around anyone in particular. But many times people see that it's my way or the highway. It's not your way or the highway. You have to consider the thoughts and feelings of other individuals. So a major part of what we do when we teach CBT is help people to understand that the world is bigger than just them and how their behaviors can affect other individuals. So we want people to become less egocentric and consider the thoughts and the feelings of others. So we have so many different tools that we present before people when we teach these concepts, when we teach responsibility. And there's so many different things to consider. We talk about role plays, we give lessons, we do worksheets. We do a lot of different things. We challenge your rational thoughts. We do a lot of work with self-talk. We talk about the camera view. We talk about concepts such as stop, look, and listen, such as coming to a train track or a railroad track, and stopping your vehicle, looking down the tracks, listening for sounds before you proceed. So we do a lot of teaching like that. Core beliefs, we talk about that. So in the next module, we'll get a little bit more into some of the actual teaching tools that we use with cognitive behavioral therapy. And again, these tools have been proven to work over a long period of time. So with that being said, we'll stop here. I want to thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this module. If you had the opportunity to tune in through YouTube, I want to thank you so much. I want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button and like us there. If you had the opportunity to go to my website, which is www.rgstrategicinterventions.com, I want to thank you again and encourage you to check out some of the other modules that we have on the website and some of the other presentations, and scroll around. There's some information there that I think will be beneficial to you as a professional as you endeavor to help kids in this particular field. So we look forward to seeing you in a future module. Thank you so much for tuning in.